From Koenigstein Road in the east to Casitas Gap in the west, an orange curtain has descended across the Ojai Valley. This is Ojai Talk of the Town. Hey everyone, Brett Bradigan, editor of your Ojai magazine, the monthly and quarterly, and the host of your podcast, Ojai Talk of the Town. Our guest this week is Ara Guzelimian, who is the artistic director of the Ojai Music Festival, and he has a very long history with the festival. This year's music director is Rhiannon Giddens, who is a former guest on the podcast and one of the leading experts or enthusiasts, talents in the musical world. And we go deep into the programming and the history of the festival and the role of arts and creativity and culture, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Hey, Ara, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Brett. It's fun to anticipate this year's festival together.
Yeah, you said you just took a call from our woman of the hour.
Rhiannon Giddens, who's pretty extraordinary. Her opera was just done in North Carolina, and she had literally just gotten back home to Ireland, having also squeezed in some engagements. I've never met a more focused multitasker.
Yeah, she is prolific.
Yeah.
Across virtually everything, even acting. She's, what first came to my attention on Nashville, of all TV shows.
I think a lot of people first encountered her there, or bluegrass fans may remember her from Carolina Chocolate Drops, which was a really pioneering group.
Yeah, bringing back that string band tradition, which had been virtually lost.
And specifically a black bluegrass tradition. Yeah. She's amazing in filling in the unwritten or written out parts of American cultural history in a very generous way, just making us all a little smarter.
I learned when she was on the podcast, which was difficult because she was in Ireland and the signal kept dropping, and it was like, hey, what can you, is that? A lot of repeating and so forth, but it was a great talk, and she, I'm a big Roots Americana fan, and so she's high on my list, and talking about how cultural memory works, specifically like country music, and the Carter family, which I just, Mother Maybelle, the way she plays, or was it Sister Sarah played the, with the bass note, she played the melody, and with she played, and the opposite of how somebody would normally play. And she said, well, she learned that from Leslie Riddle. Leslie Riddle name doesn't come up very much.
No.
He's like the promulgator of the entire country music tradition. I mean, there's the yodeling and all that too, but it's just interesting what we forget.
No, and one of the amazing things about Rhiannon Giddens is just making history more complete. And that's the spirit in which it's made.
Well, Omar certainly qualifies for that.
What an incredible story. This is her opera written with Michael Abels, an LA-based composer.
Now, how did that work? Did he write the book and she wrote the music?
She wrote the libretto, but they wrote the music completely together. And it's something of a miracle that two people writing their first opera purely in collaboration musically, that it's such a seamless and complete piece.
Yeah, what's his background? I'm not familiar.
Michael is best known these days as a composer for film. And
that's right.
He wrote the scores to Jordan Peele's Get Out and Nope.
Nope, what a film that was.
Yeah. And
did you see that?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, you should. It's bizarre.
But I've heard Michael's music. But Michael has a life as a concert composer and a film composer. And the two of them are an amazing match. It's very hard to discern.
Yeah, and how much music, what is the length? And
the opera, the original opera itself, which was done with such success at LA Opera, is 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's a full length.
Counting the intermission.
Full length opera, maybe 3 hours. And for the Ojai Festival, they've created a concert piece called Omar's Journey, which tells the story in more concentrated form so that the music will have a concert life. And this is the story of Omar ibn Said, who was an enslaved man who in the 1830s wrote an extraordinary memoir in Arabic. And he was a deeply devout Muslim. He was a Quranic scholar, but in his time on 2 different plantations, he also somehow embraced and folded in Christianity as well. And he was a very wise man of great faith. And it's another piece of American history that is, these artists are teaching all of us. And it's a very rich piece of American history.
Now, wasn't he actually sold into bondage when he was already a grown man?
Yeah, I think he was, if I remember correctly, he was in his 30s or even 40s.
Isn't that, I mean, not that there isn't anything less than tragedy associated with slavery, but to be swept into, especially if you're like a scholar. I just I'm rereading after like 40 years, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, and this level of insight that goes along with being on the extreme edge of survival and being subjugated like that. It's like, it's a shame on all levels, but something comes out of it. Thank God. I mean, otherwise it would just be magnify the tragedy.
Well, and how somebody like Omar ibn Said literally kept the faith and did it with dignity and generosity. There's a real lesson. He was from what's modern-day Senegal. He was captured, taken prisoner, and brought to the New World and sold into slavery. His first, in South Carolina, the first slave owner was particularly cruel and put him to brutal, hard labor, and he finally fled, was captured in North Carolina and put in jail. And to keep his spirits and sanity while in a jail cell, he began to write verses from the Quran in Arabic on the walls of the jail cell. And that's what brought him to the attention of others, realizing that this was a learned man.
Yeah.
And he
probably didn't have much English.
No, and he was taken by a second slave owner in North Carolina, who was, of course, still a slave owner, but at least the relationship was much more benign, and he lived out his years in North Carolina.
Have access to writing materials.
Yes, yeah. The faith and the literacy was recognized.
Yeah. So I noticed this year a lot of return performers, a lot of people who are experienced with the festival. Not just Rhiannon, who was such a big star here. Not last year, 2 years ago.
And I love weaving in artists from across the years. One of the strengths of the Ojai Festival is the community that's created, both with the audience. It is like summer camp, both with the artists, with the audience, but the artists among themselves.
Yeah, sure.
So from different years of the festival, we have the Ataka Quartet returning, Steve Schick returning, Gloria Cheng, who has played in the past, Wuman in a very different role.
And Bluefish, Redfish.
Redfish, Bluefish. But we have Justin Robinson coming for the first time, one of Rhiannon's co-founders of Carolina Chocolate Drops. Wow. We have Kehan Kalhor, who's I've tempted to call him the John Coltrane of the Persian kemanche, the lap fiddle. He's one of the most extraordinary improvisers I've ever heard in my life.
So there's a lot of new sounds and experiences.
And a Senegalese kora player, Sekou Keita, doing traditional music from Senegal.
How did you find all these? How did you round up this repertoire?
You know, the minute with any group of artists that you start pulling one thread of their curiosities, Rhiannon's partner, Francesco Torrisi, led us to Sekou Keita, the kora player. Rhiannon now is artistic director of the Silk Road, which Yo-Yo Ma founded, Silk Road Ensemble. And Kehan Kalhor had been a member of that ensemble.
It is a small world, I guess, at a certain level.
And I delight in these intersections. I love the overlaps. I think there will be, for long-time attendees, probably more non-Western music than they may be used to.
Tom Morris used to sprinkle in a few here and there, and it always went over well.
But way back in the day, because I've been coming for an eternity, Ravi Shankar played at the festival, Ali Akbar Khan. So the festival has had a wide embrace for decades.
Heterodox.
Yeah, I like that word.
Yeah. Well, it's, going to be, I guess the Messiaen and Boulez and the things that people are used to are going to, there's still a little bit, right? Don't you program some on like Friday, some Haydn and so forth?
Yeah. The Ataka Quartet have just put together a playlist that has everything from Haydn and Philip Glass to Flying Lotus and all sorts of.
I don't know what that. Oh, he's a DJ, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I know that name sounded familiar.
So it'll be both its usual expectation of wide-ranging, taking us into pretty unexpected directions. But the Sunday morning program will have everything from 1,000-year-old Chinese music for pipa, the plucked lute-like instrument, to Monteverdi and Baroque music.
Did they have Chinese have notation? I'm not much of a music person, really. But.
This is an amazing story, and on the Sunday morning concert, Wu Man, the pipa player, which is the Chinese lute, about 100 years ago, there was an extraordinary discovery in the Danhuang caves of scrolls of all kinds of learnings and writings.
I think I heard about that. More in Central Asia, right?
Yep.
Or the far western part of China.
In this collection were what appeared to be notated music, and it's taken the better part of 100 years to decode the notation.
Longer than the Rosetta Stone.
Yeah. But that's exactly the right parallel. You're exactly right. And so we're going to hear music for the Chinese pipa, the lute, that's literally 1,000 years old.
Wow.
Some of it being heard.
Echoes. Imagine the sound waves going through the ether.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we'll have, and then another thread through the festival, which I'm very happy about, because we have Kehan Kalhor, the Iranian kemanche, the lap fiddle player. There is now newly created in the last 2-3 years, a collective of women composers called the Iranian Female Composers Association.
Oh, wow, yeah. Couldn't be more timely.
It couldn't be more timely, and we had made the invitation a year ago already before events in Iran. And as those of you listening may know, the protests in Iran have the motto of women, life, freedom.
Yeah.
And these are mostly expatriate Iranian women composers who've banded together as a collective, and will have works by 5 of their composers.
Have they played together?
4 of them will be here. The 5th is in Iran and not able to travel.
Well, I mean, have they played together before this? Are they coming together as a result of the protests?
They created this collective of women composers as a way of advocating for themselves. And one of the pieces is a very touching piece for solo cello and electronics called Veiled. And it is about escaping the veil.
Yeah. Well, I hope that they manage to remain escaped.
Yeah.
Because things can take an ugly turn.
We'll have both very old music and some very new music.
Very new, yeah. I guess that's probably the widest range, 1,000 years. I don't think there's any way to play Western music at that. No, there was something from the 7th or 8th century, like Venerable Bede or something, I remember a long time ago.
Yeah. I have
music or something.
I have a feeling this Chinese music may even predate that. Wow. The 1,000-year-old is an approximate dating based on the materials, but it's not absolutely accurate, and the speculation is it's no newer than 1,000 years old.
Gotcha.
And could be older.
And then the fact that it was notated means it could have been, the music itself could have been much older than that.
And Wuman said in a conversation we had that there's illustrations that go back 2,500 years of playing the pipa. So,
have you listened to it?
I've heard her play a little of it.
And what'd you think?
It sounds like a cliche, but it sounds sort of new old.
Yeah.
It's timeless. And
what is it tonally?
It's in the traditional Chinese vocabulary and scales, but just moves in a different way. I'm not exactly sure how to put my finger on it.
Is there any modern composers that you might make a comparison, like a Steve Reich or
no?
John Luther Adams?
It's not so regular. No,
Yeah.
It's like hearing a very early version of a language.
Okay, that does sound very intriguing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I noticed I just didn't have much time to look over the program, but you got a few TBAs on there.
I think
Saturday and Sunday mornings.
Those have all completely taken shape, and I can fill those in. We're about to do the formal announcement of every detailed program. And the mornings run the gamut. On Friday morning, there is a set of music for solo piano by Black composers, including Michael Abels, the co-composer of Omar, Rhiannon and his opera. Then there will be some music of these Iranian women composers on that program, and we'll end with a pretty amazing piece by Lei Liang, who's a Chinese-American composer, for pipa, the lute instrument, and percussion. This is where Wuman, the pipa player, suddenly turns into Jimi Hendrix.
Oh, wow.
of the pipa.
So it's amplified?
Yeah. And it's a very dramatic.
It's not going to be Newport Bob Dylan type of situation.
No.
Not going to have protests.
No,
not going to be rites of spring, people throwing eggs on stage.
No, I think there will be a lot of cheering. I've heard her play related pieces, and it's so dazzling that it just brings down the house.
Yeah. Well, now you've been the music or the artistic director before. This is like your second round, right?
Yep. I was
in the 90s.
In the 90s, I was artistic director in the 90s, and I feel very lucky.
This is your third year back.
Third year back, exactly.
Nice.
I feel very lucky because the world has changed a lot since the 90s, and the festival. Tom Morris took the festival in lots of new directions.
Yeah,
so,
I wanted to talk about that. I got to have Tom on the podcast because he was adventurous, and it sounds like you are too.
Tom opened up what was possible. I think one of the geniuses of the Ojai Festival is it constantly reinvents. So given everything that preceded in Tom's time, it's given me freedom to take more leaps of faith,
sure.
like we are this year.
Been accustomed. They've been trained.
I adore this audience. They come expecting adventure, and there is a little bit of let's see what you got to throw at me.
There is a little
in this audience.
Well, one thing Tom was known for is a little poke in the eye every now and then, just to make sure people were still paying attention.
Yep.
The infamous 7-note program that went over and over. I think that was an inside joke. Do you remember the one I'm talking about?
It's not ringing a bell, but I wasn't here for every one of Tom's.
Yeah, it was from John Luther Adams to my friend. I think that's a title. To my friend Harrison, something.
Oh, Lou Harrison.
Lou Harrison.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know the piece I'm talking
I don't.
about? Oh, I was trying to figure out what was going on. It was over an hour of the same 7 notes over and over. I couldn't figure out. Maybe they're going through the circle of fists or something, but it didn't even sound like they were changing key. And then afterwards, somebody got up and said, "Play it again." That crowd went wild.
That's an Ojai moment.
People will not forget that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I blurted this out recently, and we've decided it's a keeper. I just said music sounds better in Ojai.
I believe it to be true.
There's something in the air.
Even just, like the one of my favorite bands, Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. I've heard them play like 3 or 4 times. It's just the quality of the sound. Now, they're homies. They lived here at that time. So maybe it was a little extra. But the warmth of the tone.
Yep.
And the acoustic spotting is a little interesting here. It used to be, I don't know, with the new layout. But I've heard people who were really into the acoustic said the best place to listen to a concert was on the tennis court. That there was like a pocket where the music just had the tonal warmth. I don't know if that's true or not. People pull my leg. How am I going to know?
They just want to ship you out to the tennis court.
Yeah, that's probably what's going on.
Yeah, I've never heard a concert from there, so I can't speak to that.
But you did the Chalk Talks for years and years, huh?
Yeah.
So how do you, you must be the most musically broad knowledge person. I don't know. Is that what I'm going for? Scholar? What would you call a polymath?
I would just say somebody who exercises curiosity and follows where the thread leads. I'm a very happy camper. In the last couple of days in the car, I've listened to a Tunisian oud player who plays, named Dafer Youssef, with a new album called Street of Minarets, in which it's with Herbie Hancock and Ambrose Akinmusire, a jazz trumpeter who lives in the Bay Area. I've listened to Haydn quartets, Chopin piano music. I listened to Joni Mitchell's Ladies of the Canyon this morning driving. So, why limit yourself? And I swear most people I know rarely listen to only one kind of music. So why shouldn't the curation of concerts represent that?
Yeah. Well, are there any premieres this year?
Omar's Journey, this concert
this is a different
piece.
Piece than the opera itself has been performed, but not the concert
piece. But the concert piece
Gotcha.
is a kind of distillation for 5 singers and 7 instruments. So that's an Ojai Festival commission. On one of the early morning concerts up at Zalk, up at Happy Valley.
I typically don't go to those. Like 8 o'clock in the morning, huh? I did go once.
But the hardcore audience goes.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. It's like
we have a commissioned piece by Aida Shirazi, who's one of these Iranian composers, for kemanche and electronics. So an ancient instrument and computer-generated electronic sound.
Well, what we can do now, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah. So those are 2 pieces that'll get heard for the first time.
Now, you would know, but I'm fascinated by folk music, like, different parts of the world and how it developed. Wasn't Haydn, didn't he take a lot of those old Hungarian folk dances and stuff and rework those and
he
play with the melodies?
He certainly did, and the separation between what we call classical music and folk music or pop music was not as pronounced in Haydn and Mozart's time. And so, sort of country dances or Hungarian melodies ended up being incorporated. In Mozart's time, there was a vogue for Turkish music. And so there's the famous Rondo alla Turca, which is, an Austrian's evocation of Turkish music. And so in a way, I think in the newest generation of musicians, and we had that experience with the Muck as well, the boundaries between fixed genres are beginning to be much more flexible or blurred. The very opening piece of the festival is a piece for percussion called Liquid Borders by
I saw that title.
Gabriela Ortiz, who's a Mexican composer.
I think she's been here before.
She's been here before as well. And I like the piece very much, but I also love the idea of liquid borders as a metaphor. As a metaphor for the festival as a whole.
Yeah.
And as I said, the using genre to exclude is beginning to not hold.
What is that? Do you think people are just more open, that there's a little more sense of freedom? Or is it deliberate? Or is there people who are persuading us?
I think it's some of all of that, but it's largely the last one you said. There are people persuading us.
Actively working.
And look, Rhiannon Giddens is
prime example,
an Oberlin-trained opera singer who then became a scholar of African-American bluegrass traditions. And one of the things she said when we invited her to be music director was that she's drawn to the Ojai Festival because she can be all the things she is without having to choose.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm sure it'd be very attractive for somebody with her broad range of interests.
And she was just delighted that she can sing Monteverdi and Black spirituals, do her own music.
She was a big hit year before last. That was the first kind of return in the flesh festival, right?
In fall
2021.
It was moved to September.
Yeah, that's right.
And miraculously, every artist was able to move from June to September. And that was an exhilarating festival because it was when we all came out of our caves.
That's right. A lot of pent-up enthusiasm.
Yeah. And it was at the end of that festival when she talked about how at home she felt as an artist in everything she's allowed to do in Ojai. And I said to her, well, do you want to come back and play a bigger role?
You said to that
I said
year,
that,
did you think she...
I said it I'll confess to you, I can back up and tell the whole story. It was our first emergence from COVID. And so there was no social events, no parties, no cast parties, nothing. Everybody, you put your mask on and went your separate ways. And so when the festival ended, there was such exhilaration. And Rhiannon said, is there any party? And we said, no. And because
they used to always end up at the Deer Lodge after the concerts, the musicians.
I see the appeal. I'm a fan of the Deer Lodge. And so we just simply went back to the house where she was staying. And the host,
Lois Rice's house, and some of the other artists came, about a dozen people. We did takeout pizza delivered, and everybody was in great spirits. And that's when I said to her, and she was saying what a fantastic experience she'd had. And I said, can you see yourself coming back in a bigger role? And she said, what are you asking? It was like, what are your intentions here? And I said, I'm asking you if you'd be music director sometime in the future. Did you get down on one knee with an engagement band?
Ed, without missing a beat, said yes. And we, both had a little bit of red wine. And a couple of days later, I texted her and said, I was serious. That wasn't the red wine talking. Yeah. Would you do this? And that's how it began.
And you were thinking about programming right away?
Yeah. just because she's got such a huge embrace of music.
The vocabulary.
Yeah, exactly.
So what was like the first pieces that you programmed? Like, were you trying to put some shape to it, or you're just like, ooh, this is interesting, this is interesting?
We talked very early on about these two key artists, Kehan Kalhor, the Iranian Kemanche player.
She was, didn't Rhiannon have a major role with the Silk Road Ensemble?
She's now the artistic director. Yep.
So
having succeeded Yo-Yo Ma. And then Wuman, the pipa player, is a current member of Silk Road. And we both admired these two artists. So that was very early on. The idea of creating a new piece from Omar was very early on.
Yeah, because she'd probably been working on that 10 years or something.
Yep. And I just said to her, it's such an important piece and such an important story, and not every city can put on an opera. So is there a way of creating a version of the piece that works
Well,
to
how
tell
many
the
pieces
story?
would there be in the full production?
Oh, gosh, in the whole opera, there's probably, 28 numbers or something like that.
Yeah.
And this will be less than half that.
Well, how many instruments? How many players?
How many players?
Well, I wanted to ask that too, how many songs, but...
Big chorus, so 60, 80, orchestra of about the same, cast of maybe 15, 18 people.
Wow.
And this version...
That would look great on stage.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece and beautiful production. It was a big hit at LA Opera, and we'll go to San Francisco Opera this coming fall.
Wow. Now, what's going to be the biggest number of performers on stage this year?
Well, the last concert is called Strings Attached, and it'll include a duet for Kemanche and Kora, the Senegalese harp-like instrument, and the Persian fiddle. Rhiannon playing banjo and Wuman playing pipa will do. It's sort of a cultural summit. It's these string instruments from different cultures jamming.
Interesting.
And the end of that concert is pretty much everybody jamming.
There's no programming. It's just like
No, that one's going to be announced from the stage, and it's called Strings Attached. It'll be a party.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
Well, last year was a great finale.
That taught us.
Those kids had so much energy, and I call them kids. I don't know how old they are.
Literally dancing off the stage.
Yeah, well,
and dancing out to the lawn.
People were going crazy. It was just such a great way to sum up which was another great year. Yeah,
and that was a leap. That was. When we began, that was a muck, which is a collective of 17 artists, including dancers. And what I love about Ojai, as you say, the music director is going to be these 17 people who are going to have free run of the place. Yeah. And the audience said, okay, we'll go along.
Yeah. Well,
and we had fantastic ticket sales last year.
Well, they just electrified with their energy.
Yeah.
They're really great. And those are your kids, aren't they? Those are your former students.
Many of them, I think 13 or 14 out of 17.
Ara was the provost or dean of the Juilliard.
And a lot of the members of AMUC were students in my time.
Yeah.
It's a pretty intensely creative bunch.
So, yeah, well, they have this, I forget who it was, Matthew? I don't know. I was talking to, said the key to is going to the barn in Vermont in the summer and just eating communally and just doing different projects. And there's no hierarchy. It's just however the spirit moves. But yeah, I love talking to them about, when they were on a podcast, about Black Mountain College, because I picked up a lot of that energy from them. Mm-hmm. And John Cage used to spend a lot of time in Ojai.
I didn't know that.
Even before Black Mountain, I think. In fact, he wrote music here. Somewhere I read something, he turned up, probably just like on a Google search or something. And I forget what he said, something about, he was kvetching about one thing or another, but he said, well, I can't blame the weather or something. He was talking about how lovely it was here. He's here in like January or February or something.
I'm not of a particularly mystical bent, but there's
Yes, you
something
are. You told me that before.
Ojai that I think is an exceptionally conducive setting for creativity.
I have a theory.
I'm listening.
I'm just coming up with it now because it just reminded me of something. Have you heard of stone tape theory?
Mm-mm.
That's a Victorian notion about ghosts. It explains ghosts because it's like these traumatically emotional events that record themselves into the rocks and the trees and the ground and the soil and everything under certain conditions, then they replay. And I think maybe that's with good things too.
Yeah. Well, and it dates, these mountains are ringed with Chumash sites and rock effigies, so it goes back to the first peoples here. And then, you jump to the 20th century and you have Beatrice Wood and Krishnamurti.
You had Julie Tumamai on stage like a couple years ago. That was really fun. Yeah, she, she's a friend. I've known her for a long time.
But I think that there is a continuity of creativity here that makes this a very sympathetic setting.
Yeah. Well, the artists love it here. I can tell just from the glow that they seem to have and the sparks in their eyes. It's like to come together with their peers to do adventurous stuff. It doesn't get better than that.
No, and it worked with Rhiannon Giddens as well. She's one in a long line.
Yeah, she got the Ojai moon glow.
Yep.
Yeah.
But also, I think this incredibly important thing for an artist to be allowed to be who you are, not hemmed in any way.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, is it Thursday or Friday? You do have some of the more traditional programming.
It's got a range, as I said, there'll be Haydn and Philip Glass and Monteverdi and...
but no Messiaen. Isn't that like the one continuing thread of every festival over the last 50 years?
He was here himself in the 80s. And as somebody who responded deeply to the outdoors, he is kind of the Ojai house composer in a way. But no, not this year. But I suspect there will be other Messiaen in coming years.
Well,
we need to surprise.
I just love that, his music, it's both challenging and accessible, if that makes any sense.
Completely.
It's really, it's like... not mesmerizing isn't the right word.
But there's a kind of visionary quality to it. He was somebody...
very much in the spirit of the festival,
yep.
I think is what I'm trying to get at.
And somebody who responded deeply to the outdoors, to birdsong.
Oh, my God. The festival. We've talked about this before, how many people, when you ask what's your favorite performance, that L.A. Phil finale with... From the Canyon to the Stars, 3.5 hours. That just went by so fast. I remember getting itchy and, those were the old seats and my butt was sore. And then all of a sudden it turned on. I'm not sure what it was exactly. Maybe it was those big sand drums, the way that they made that whooshing wind sound. And I just was absolutely enchanted. It was really, there's been so many fun concerts. I was thinking about what was my favorite of all concerts, or the one that stuck with me the most. I don't know if you remember Tom's Rain, the Saturday performance, the Opera Buffa by Carl Orff. I don't remember the name of it, but it was just a lot of hijinks on stage. Great
the
costuming.
Classical style. Was that it?
I don't remember.
By Jeremy
There were clowns
Dank?
and stuff.
Oh, huh. No,
it might have been Jeremy Dank. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember. But
sure.
I love that because, Carl Orff had to operate under all these restraints. And yet, when you look at this opera, it's all anti-authoritarian, just making fools out of the cops and, the authority figures and the gray bureaucrats and all these colorful artistic people swirling around. And I was like, I wonder how that passed muster with the Nazis.
Well, Artists are often the real subversives, aren't they?
Well, every joke is a tiny revolution. Isn't that what Orwell said?
That's a great line.
Yeah, I just thought that one particularly really spoke to that subversive spirit. Yeah. Any others that you remember that really stuck with you?
Well, you mentioned the Messiaen that kind of took over, and you reminded me ages ago, probably 30 years ago, Schoenberg's Piero Lunaire, which, as the name suggests, is the ultimate moonstruck classical piece. And in true Ojai fashion, about a third of the way in the piece, the biggest, brightest full moon appeared above the bowl.
Yeah.
Cue the moon presiding over this.
That does sound very Boulesian touch.
Highly moonstruck piece.
Yeah.
So.
That was really something. Now, you said you've been coming since you were a teenager, is that right? You grew up in Los Angeles?
I did.
Yeah.
I think I remember coming when I was 14 or 15 with my parents just to visit.
Just to visit Ojai or to visit?
To visit Ojai.
Festival? When was your first festival?
My first festival was when I was in college. I actually sang.
You were on stage?
I was on stage
a choral group?
in the UCLA a cappella choir with a very young Michael Tilson Thomas conducting.
Yeah. Oh, man, he got dissed in that movie Tar. I don't know if you saw that.
No, I've missed that
I think
reference.
It was some kind of an inside joke.
Huh.
You saw that movie?
I didn't.
Oh, you should. You'd enjoy that. Really, the life of a conductor. It's interesting. I didn't have any way. I'd never thought I'd connect with that. That's so far out of my experience. But Cate Blanchett can wrap herself in any kind of role. She's a protean actor.
Yep, that's a good word.
Well, some people are whoever they are, like Woody Harrelson, who I adore.
Mm-hmm.
He's good in everything. But he's the same. He's Woody Harrelson in everything.
Cate Blanchett is a shapeshifter.
Absolutely. Yes. That's exactly the word. Speaking of which, I was going to put it in your ear because I do it to all the artistic directors. It's Harry Parch.
Well, the instruments, the Harry Parch instruments, I believe, live in There's
two sets, right?
Right.
There's that college back east and then somewhere in the Bay Area.
Yep.
Or maybe it's in Oregon.
But Parch was still to this day one of the most unusually innovative voices in any kind of music.
That's
a good idea.
Well, Betty Freeman was the one who introduced me to.
Yeah.
I didn't even know who she was. She always sat behind me at the festival. We were festival friends, and said, I keep telling them they got to get some Harry Parch here. Or people don't know, Betty Freeman was Beverly Hills Housewife. Mm-hmm. That
David Hockney painting.
Oh yeah, that famous painting. Yeah, she was probably in her 90s when I knew her.
Yeah, and Betty was one of the greatest patrons of new music. I mean, she supported
not just here, everywhere.
Harry Parch, Philip Glass, Pierre Boulez, John Cage, Merce Cunningham in dance. And she did it in a very unassuming way. And her home was full of Hockneys and Lichtensteins and Dan Flavin. She was a very discerning, very creative arts patron.
And she seemed so down to earth.
Yeah,
I didn't
completely.
get the feeling she was like an aesthete of any kind.
No, she just, it was the truest kind of most pure, she just liked the stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know I know she was a big fan of Harry Parch. I didn't know she was a patron because I think of him being more like 40s, 50s, 60s. But I guess he did make it into like the 70s.
And I think she may have begun supporting him in the 60s.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about Harry Parch because it's so fascinating. But he grew up in Tombstone, Arizona, which is the most unlikely place for a composer of that style. I lived in Sierra Vista and Bisbee, and so Tombstone was right in the middle, and it's just a tourist trap. Why he came out of there, and then he was an usher for the Met. I think he ended up at the Metropolitan Opera House as an usher with Leonard Bernstein and Walter Piston.
Huh.
You know Walter Piston, right?
Yeah, that's composer and teacher.
Well, he wrote that book, Harmony,
Yep.
right? That big, dense textbook that they use for, I think, from like the Cretaceous to the Jurassic period. Maybe they're still using it. But that would have been, like such a journey to get from Tombstone to there. And then he vanished. He vanished for like 10 or 12 years. And then he turned up with a steamer trunk full of all this weird music that he wrote in this 47 or 41 note interval scale, which you can't really play on a stringed instrument, although he was a viola player. So I think you had to do like zigzaggy frets, the fretwork on that. I don't know if you've ever seen
He created his own family of instruments.
Yeah,
he was an inventor. He was a real American iconoclast and maverick pioneer.
And he had this amazingly, maybe it wasn't basso, but rich baritone that he'd intone these tone poems that he'd written, bum talk. He'd pick up these graffiti in these rail yards in Barstow and stuff.
Somewhere, but imagine if some melding of Allen Ginsberg and Walt Whitman had decided to be a composer.
And Stravinsky.
And Stravinsky. So he was a real original.
He seems like a natural for Ojai.
I know in the long ago past, his music was done, and it's probably due for a revival.
Yeah, well, I just think, the stage setting, I'm just imagining all these big percussion and, the cloud chamber bowls, which are one of his more famous instruments. But to play that music with 41 notes per scale, it sounds like it would be very difficult, but it's not. It's beautiful. It's it's very, it's fun to listen to. Now, you're talking about Betty Freeman being his patron, and I'm always fascinated by how artists make a living because a lot of them don't. It's very difficult. And then, he had the best model that I can think of where he had like people that had like subscriptions to him, and they kept him supplied with bourbon and oatmeal, and he lived in a barn in Oregon, and he just created all day. There's that David Kelly, I think that was David Kelly, wrote that blog post, 1,000 True Fans. That's that guy. He probably only had 1,000 fans in the entire world. I just think he's due for, that's the kind of person who's due for another run at fame. Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll happen here or elsewhere. It's too creative a spirit to be kept down for too long.
I hope so. I think part of it is the difficulty in staging. There's probably some rights issues too. I'm not sure why he hasn't more performed. But yeah, just like, okay, I put that into your noggin, I hope.
Duly registered.
Okay. So what else is, going on behind the scenes this year that people set the stage for us?
One of the happy discoveries last year was we did a piece with dance and music at the Greenberg Center at the Ojai Valley School, the lower campus. And we discovered what a wonderful setting that is for a more intimate indoor experience, especially in the afternoon when the heat of the day doesn't make sitting outdoors the best thing. Yeah. And so this year we're doing what I consider one of the real classics of contemporary music from 30 years ago, Tan Dun's Ghost Opera.
Oh, yeah. Which is there's two performances.
There's two performances for pipa and string quartet. It was written for Wuman and originally the Kronos Quartet, and Wuman will be with us, but the Ataka Quartet, a new generation quartet.
Who's been around the festival
who came 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we're doing a completely new staging with a phenomenal dancer called Pei Ju Chien, who was a Martha Graham dancer and now is out on her own, who comes from both great Martha Graham modern dance and Chinese dance. And it's a shamanistic piece, and the dancer will sort of embody the ghost, the spirit
I can
guide.
See that. Yeah, sure.
And the piece has very ritual qualities, even though it's written for string quartet. They sing, they play percussion instruments, they play water bowls, and they move from place to place as the piece progresses. And we've added
the musicians.
The musicians, yeah.
Is that the music's on, or the instruments are like on a stand? So they.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Stations of the Cross in a way, except obviously in a very different tradition and not religious in the same way. And we've added this element of a dancer who is this wordless spirit guide to the pipa player and so there's...
And is there a narrative to it of some kind?
There's an implied narrative in the music and some of the text. They also speak text. And it's both sort of ancient Chinese ritual and street theater, as well as references to Bach and Shakespeare. It's pretty wide-ranging. It's a piece from about 1993 or 4.
Okay.
And it had a great run 30 years ago, and I just thought it was worth taking a fresh look at it for our time.
And... I mean, it sounds like the staging and so forth is going to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah. And we've gotten the bug of doing some more theatrical work in these indoor settings.
So the first year back from COVID, we tried to keep things a little simple and no parties and stuff. And it looks like you've got a pretty busy schedule this year. How do you, just even keeping up? You must have to remind yourself to stay hydrated and stuff.
Yes. Well, but,
it's a sprint.
One of our very loyal audience members said something that I thought was the best insight. It's an immersive experience. And so part of the Ojai Festival experience is immersing yourself and having this intense series of...
Yeah, not discrete concerts so much as like just the whole weekend.
Yeah, just allow it to filter in and absorb and react as you will. And allow yourself to be surprised and, as you said, occasionally be really irritated by something.
I would get that feeling like, wait a minute, is this like a prank show?
Yeah.
Am I being punked?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then in the next, or that piece suddenly takes a turn and you say, oh, wait, this is working. Or the next piece catches you off guard.
Mm-hmm. Or even just, they always say, well, I know what I like. But Vincent Price, who wrote a book called I Like What I Know.
Yeah.
Did you know that? I'm sure you knew he was a big art collector.
He was an art collector, yeah.
Yeah, very discerning taste. And that was his whole premise, is that people say they don't, they know what they like. No, they don't. You need to be educated about those tastes. And even if you end up not liking it, your base of knowledge is expanded. Maybe you know why you didn't like it. Maybe, just being better informed.
And allowing yourself to be caught, and your taste to be caught off guard. I didn't think I liked this.
And then things stick with you, too, that you thought, like we're still talking about that John Luther Adams concert there that Tom foisted on us, which I'm sure he was sitting at the back, had a big smile on his face. He was enjoying the hell out of it.
It's a big experience.
Yeah. So what's the future looking like now? You must be working at least 3 years out on certain
One
elements.
of the advantages of a festival setting rather than opera company or symphony orchestra is in June is not a peak time in concert giving, and a lot of artists are free and not booked 4 years
Is that
in advance. I think it's just the natural rhythm. It wasn't by design. It's between winter seasons and summer festivals.
Yeah.
And so I like the fact that you can be responsive and not locked in 4 years in a row. I think that also gives us a freedom to be fresher.
And be able to adjust on the fly.
Yeah.
But
and hear something you like and start.
Who's the music director next year?
It's not public yet, and I'm not going to tell.
Why not?
Coming soon. Coming soon.
Give me a scoop. Come on, Ara.
No, it'll be somebody very much admired, and it'll be a departure from these 2 years.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, I know the attendance has been really very good the last few years. So we're on the map, certainly.
Well, it was interesting. There was, in an unrelated article in the New York Times last summer, which reviewed a handful of more traditional festivals around the country in Colorado and elsewhere. The writer who hadn't come here.
Not Anthony.
No. It was a writer named David Allen for the New York Times, said, there was still a virtue to some of this traditional programming at these other festivals. And he wrote, and I swear to you, it's a quote, because not every festival can be an Ojai.
Oh,
so
God.
It's entered the vocabulary.
I love that.
That it's understood.
That's really great.
And I think, loving this community as we both do, that speaks to the spirit of Ojai.
It sure does. We're in the zeitgeist.
Yep.
In a big way. Yeah. I think that's a good place to end. Anything else you want to say?
No, come just take the leap and enjoy the company of...
Well, I can guarantee you that my audience and festival listeners has a very small overlap.
Great.
The Venn diagrams don't even touch, I think, but maybe this will help get it out there.
Come hear some great music that will surprise you.
Thanks, Ara. Hey everyone, Brett Bradigan here. Just thinking out loud. Now, typically I'll just use this time to sum up what we just listened to as I learned in the military briefings. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you just told them. But for some reason, my mind went off in a different place. I think it's been the proliferation of deep fake videos and so forth that's out there. And a lot of it is kind of menacing, and we've seen some instances of really bad stuff. And I hope that we're able to learn some critical thinking skills, and people will be skeptical about these things. I fear not, though. I fear, like Winston Churchill said, a lie will get halfway around the world before the truth can put on its pants. Some of it is fun, though, and I wanted to show you something that I thought was a very clever and excellent use of this technology.
I'm going to give you a big bag of this heady bud, but I'm taking your stash of mids. They're going to say, come on, man, get out of here. That's right. Get the hell out of here. We like stems, and we like seeds, where I come from. Where I come from, we don't worry about these fruity-tooty California-style buds. Okay? See, I'm from Scranton, and what I'm smoking is dirt. Let's get that straight, Jack. I'm smoking pure brick. Ass. Okay? Americans are wanting to smoke that dirt. Okay? You go up to someone and say, hey, I'm going to give you a big bag of this heady bud, but I'm taking your stash of mids. They're going to say, come on, man, get out of here. That's right. Get the hell out of here. We like stems, and we like seeds, where I come from. Where I come from, we don't worry about these fruity-tooty...
I hope that wasn't too shocking for you, but I found that particularly clever, and I thought for all the bad side, the perils, the dangers, the menace of this deepfake technology and artificial intelligence, there is an upside. Anyway, that's it for this episode of Ojai Talk of the Town. We'll keep an ear out.